Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining me today for this lessons learned conversation. I've been so excited to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dana, for having me as well. I'm excited to join and speak to your viewers.
We love these conversations because we get to know so much about our guests, and then just really seeing where our conversation goes, because obviously we don't script these talks, so we can end up anywhere during the conversation. So for our listeners' purpose, can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Alicia Beatrice, and I am a soulful artist and also a creative entrepreneur and author. So the way I got started, I started my very first business in 2009 with a DBA. And I started off as a consultant doing what I was paid to do in my full-time work, which was
Mhm.
grant writing at the time. So I went into doing some consulting work in that area. And what happens is it evolved into me going back to school to become a social worker. Actually, I missed working with
Mm.
people because I did it for so long. Um, and so fast forward, so it evolved into me becoming a social worker and also getting into therapy and healing myself from trauma, which is really important as well. And
Mhm.
that's been a lifelong journey too. And what happened is I ended up stepping out and writing my first book in 2016 and sharing my personal story
Mm.
about healing and trauma and forgiveness and love and faith and so many other different things. And so I started sharing my book and working with people of color, Black women, men, leaders in the community, churches, um, and entrepreneurs, and really trying to inspire them to heal themselves as well
Mhm.
so that they can show up more present and aware in their life and their business and be happier. Because I noticed that a lot of people just really weren't happy. They were chasing
Mhm.
their dream and they weren't happy. And that's how I got to that point. And so now I've shared my story and shared my books with I've written 3 books in that
Wow.
area and continue to work as a social worker in my work that I do outside of business. And now it has evolved into starting a business, an actual business brand called Black Family Business,
Mhm.
and starting it as a community for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. And it's more than a community, it's more of a family. It's part of my journey and struggle. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Was not really finding the right kind of community, and also being facing some challenges in communities in the past, more
Mhm.
so with my past story and being kicked out of a church because of some of the trauma I dealt with, and having to heal from that. So Black Family Business is a place for everyone. It's all inclusive, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, and especially for Black and Brown people who have experienced some things. So it has evolved. Business has evolved for me over really like the last decade to being where I am today.
Wow. So are you still full-time, a full-time count social worker? Or are you full-time in your business?
Yes, I am still full time as a therapist. I'm working
Mhm.
with Black mothers right now, providing trauma therapy to them, parenting support, yoga as well. I'm working on becoming a yoga teacher as well. And that's a part of my mindfulness practice too. And business is part time. And I'm still working toward my goal of business becoming full time, along
Mhm.
with the creative work that I'm doing with my music as an artist.
Nice, nice. I love to ask that question because, in business, specifically with entrepreneurs, I find that there's this stigma of sorts of you're either full-time or you're part-time looking to become full-time, right? And so I always like to ask, because myself, I'm full-time, but I'm not necessarily looking to go full-time at any time soon. And that's just because of what I do. But some people are and some people aren't. And there's nothing wrong with either one, any of the choices that we're making in relation to our entrepreneurship, because that's what works for us, right? But I'd love to ask specifically, because your full-time job really marries well with your side hustle, if you will. And so I'm always interested to find that out. Tell me
Yeah,
how you navigate having a full-time job and a side business.
absolutely. And I'm glad that you asked that question, because that's been a part of my evolution and my personal growth as well. Because I really did struggle with that in the beginning of, this whole idea of not being a full-time entrepreneur and hearing all the noise out there about, do you want to leave your job? You want to
Mhm.
quit your job? And I'm like, yes, I do. I want to be the full-time entrepreneur and all of that.
Right.
But what I have learned to surrender to is the work that I'm doing full-time is of service to my side hustle or my business.
Mm.
This is where I've developed my skills. 'Cause as I told you back in 2009, when I started consulting, it was the work I was getting paid to do. And I was literally doing it as a side hustle. And it became full-time work for me at the time, because I was a work from home mom at the time too, had just had my little baby. But what I've learned is it's okay that I work full-time for someone else as a W-2 employee. Um, it's kind of like I have my own practice though, however, because I'm an independently licensed clinician. So I
Mhm.
can do my work anywhere. And it affords me the flexibility to work on my creative projects like my music. And even outside of what we're facing right now with the pandemic, I'm still able to work from home and manage my family and work with my children. I'm working with other moms and I'm a mom myself. So it affords me that flexibility in my lifestyle to pursue these creative projects I'm working on along with business. And I think that everyone should really embrace that and be grateful. Practice gratitude with being where you are right now.
Where you are right
It's
now.
okay.
Yes, because everybody's journey is different. And we have a problem a lot of the times with that comparison, trying to compare ourselves to somebody else, it's somebody else's journey. And I'm like, that's their story. Their story doesn't have the ebbs and flows that,
Absolutely.
your story has. And so it's important for you to really embrace where you are, where you're being led. I believe God puts us in places that we're supposed to be. And sometimes we choose to go somewhere else, and then he brings us back. And sometimes when he's bringing us back, he brings us back in a way that, we don't like. But the truth is this is where we're supposed to be. And there's lessons to be learned along the way. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, as far as your full-time job is concerned, do they know about your side hustle, or is it something that you just kind of did? Is it a requirement in your profession to mention that you're doing this as well, or does it not matter?
That's a great question. In the beginning, when I first started out, when I wrote my book and was sharing my story, it felt like it was more of a secret, something that I wasn't, talking about at work. And I felt like I had to like separate the two.
Mhm.
However, right now where I am, I'm like really appreciating my journey now, because I can talk about it now. Like when I interviewed to get this position that I'm in right now, and especially having so much so much, what's the word I'm looking for? I feel like I have more power now because because I'm more seasoned in the work that I'm doing, and
Mhm.
I'm it's like a private practice. But I shared that in my interview. I shared it openly and talked about my experiences. It was a part of my resume. It's a
Mhm.
full package. I was like,
Mhm.
this is the package involved with who I am. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an artist as well.
Right.
And it's highly, I feel like where I'm right now, it is appreciated and accepted as well. So
Mhm,
I can talk about it and just fill out a little form, outside work form, and
mhm.
that's it. And it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you just said that because I mean, I look when you were talking about your book and talking about your story, I had written down. I was like, "Ooh, let's talk about this. Let's dig into this." And this really like I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Just the getting to this point because when you were talking about sharing your story at work, it was part of your package, it was part of your interview process. To me, that's your brand, right? It's part of who you are, and so many people are wanting people to know who they are, but they're not willing to share that brand. They're not not the brand, because that's not what people say. They don't want to share the information, the private stuff about themselves, but that's really who they are. That's what feeds you and what makes you, that's your goals, that's your purposes, that's everything that you're doing. But yet we want to keep it to ourselves. And it's like, you can't fault people for not knowing who you are if you're not willing to share who you are. So it's amazing. And I love the fact that you, during your interview process, you included that, because in my opinion, that is part of your branding. It's part of who you are. And that's the package, like you said. So was that intentional just at the point where you were in your life, or had you always kind of, once you wrote the book, did you at that point realize I need to be intentional about including this part of me?
It was a struggle at first, because when I first wrote my book, like where I was working, it was unfortunately a toxic workplace,
Hmm.
and I ended up moving on to other places to work, and
Hmm.
it became more of a I embraced it, and I was like, this is a part of my identity, not
Yeah.
necessarily a title to say, oh, I'm author and this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
But I was like, this is a part of my identity. This is the work that I do. And I don't want to have that struggle inside of, oh, if they find out that I'm doing this or that. I was like, this is a part of who I am. So it became a part of my identity.
Yeah.
When I go anywhere, even if I'm doing something for work, I bring my full self into work. It's like, well,
Mhm.
I have these resources. And if it's appropriate to share it with the people I'm working with, then I can offer it as a resource to them. If not, just know that it is a part of what I do. And I feel
Yeah.
like it's the value that I can bring to my workplace along with the work that I'm doing outside. So
Mhm.
I've brought that. It's been a journey to get to that place of this is a
Right.
part of my identity, and it's of value. So
Yeah.
I pride it, and I'm not ashamed to share what I'm doing, or feel
Mhm.
like it's, I should be a closet in the closet about the things that I'm doing or have these
Right.
secrets.
And I think that is the biggest struggle, specifically with side hustlers, is drawing that line. So many of us are trying to split ourselves into this business persona and this personal persona, when really you are one person. And so it is
Right.
very stressful, and it drains your energy trying to keep these two things separate. And like one of the I think it was in a blog post or something that I put out, I was asking, when you're at work, in your work environment, a lot of times when you meet somebody, the very first thing they ask you is, where do you live? Where are you from? Are you married? Do you have children? Like all the questions that they're asking you are personal questions so that they can connect with you on a personal level. So why are we
Yeah.
so focused on keeping that side of us kind of, like you said, in the closet over here? We don't really want to talk about it. We got to
Mhm.
stop doing that, because it is the value that you're
Yeah.
bringing to that organization. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So let's dig into the book. Let's talk about what I'm really interested in
Okay.
talking about is what at what point did you decide I'm ready to tell my story? Like, because you have everybody has a backstory. They have something that has impacted their lives. But at what point did you say, I need to share this?
Well, I had been in therapy And that was a major breakthrough, like getting into therapy and being consistently staying in, really
Mm-hmm.
committing to myself that I'm going to do this work and not just half-ass it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had started having breakthroughs with the work I was doing, I decided, well, I want to share my story and I want to use it as a tool to help other people,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I wanted to be heard as well and be acknowledged for my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't go into all the glory details about, my what happened. It's more of
Mm-hmm.
strategies to help people move through. But I really wanted to, it just felt like this urge or this sense inside of me that it was something that I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to step out and do it at that moment. If I didn't do it, then that opportunity would pass me by. So it was
Mm-hmm.
just a part of that healing journey that I needed to share it. And now I'm seeing how it is evolved into more than just sharing my story. It's a part of like my business legacy, the
Mm-hmm.
story of
Ooh, that's beautiful. I love.
this journey of this community that I'm creating, this family that I'm creating for other Black and Brown entrepreneurs through Black
Mm-hmm.
family business.
Mm-hmm. So the process that you went through, so was this kind of, I've talked to a couple of different authors, right? And I always ask this question because as a process person, as an organization person, I always am interested in what that journey looked like. So was this I have thoughts, I'm just going to write them down, or did you have a very strategic, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to get this out, and I'm going to write a book, and you had a plan of action of how you were going to do it? Can you talk kind of through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation about creative processes. So for me in the beginning, it wasn't a set strategic plan of how I was going to get it done. I have more of a strategic plan now and how I work with other entrepreneurs to do, but it wasn't that way. And I find a lot of my creative processes now are not that way. Like I have a set strategic plan. It's more of going with the flow
Yeah.
of how I'm led to do things, like how spirit leads me to do things, and the intention that I put out there of what it is that I want to, get back in return. So it wasn't a strategic process. I wish I could say that it was, but it wasn't. It was just more of me going with how I was, how spirit led me to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's great. That's kind of how my blog posts and podcast episodes, that's how they come about. It's I'm listening to something and something somebody says will trigger a thought, and how to apply it to organization, or how to apply it to side hustles, or how to, apply it to moms. And so that's kind of how my juices flow. And typically I'll just, if I'm out and I have my phone, I'll just, put the thought down so I don't lose it. Or if I'm at home, I'll type it into my PM tool. What was your process of, okay, you've got this thought, you were led by the spirit to do, to have this thought or to put this in? Were you writing them down? Like, can you talk about just that? I don't want to get too, because I know that this is part of your business to teach people how to do it, but
Mhm.
just from your initial process of thinking, was that more just journal writing or put it on sticky note? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It was definitely journal writing. That's actually what I would share with folks to sign up for my email list was journal writing. I would always encourage them to journal because I've been journaling since I was a young child, like as early as maybe 7 or 8. Um, so it was journaling during that time through therapy and really just a collection of my lifelong process. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, when I started writing the book specifically, I recall I was journaling specific things and writing down a lot of thoughts, exactly as you said, just writing things down. And that's how I started with the process.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think journaling is one of those things. It's funny. I don't do like the formalized journaling where I have a specific book that I go and I write in daily. but I find that the notes on my, the notes app on my phone, or I'll find little, thoughts where I've written a big block of text just because I'm trying to get those thoughts out um, on paper. So do you think it's good for people to make it a more formalized process, or really whatever works, just get it out? What is your feeling about that?
Well, my feeling is always starting where you are.
Mhm.
I mean, some people, they may have whatever your process is, if it's sticky notes, if it's finding whatever you can write on a piece of a paper towel, if you're just driving in a car and you find a little piece of paper on the floor, whatever works for you, start where you are. And really, my whole philosophy is simplify, and be kind and gentle with yourself. So don't get so frustrated and caught up with everything having to be so perfect and
Mm,
so formalized right now. Just start where you are. You will get there. Honestly, trust yourself in the process that you'll get to that place of completion, but
mm,
just
mm.
get started wherever you are. I
I
don't care where you're writing. You could be writing on a piece of toilet paper. Whatever you're doing that works for you, just get started
just
and
write
do
it
it.
there. Then my organizing self is like, then to find you a place where you just put all those little notes so you can find them later.
Absolutely.
Just your little box, your little, okay, this is my little thought
A
box.
little box.
I love
Just throw it in the thought box and you'll come
it.
back to it later and organize it.
Yes, yes. Put it into segments. That's awesome. I love that. And I've it's funny when I go through organizing my office, or I'm going through decluttering my phone, or whatever it is that I'm working on, and I'll find these little notes where I've written stuff down. Sometimes I'm like, what was I talking about? Because it's just a half a thought. But then other times I'm like, ooh, that was good, reading back through things. So it is a journey, not only in the process of, but when you come back to revisit, just the memories it triggers, and the newfound thoughts that it triggers when you're revisiting. It's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So tell me what
Yeah.
the three books are, the titles of the three books. As you said, you wrote three. So what are the titles of the three books that you've written?
Oh, as I'm thinking about it, the organized part of me would have been like, you should have had them sitting right near you. They're like over there. I'd have to reach. But so the very first one, it's actually a series.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that I intentionally did, but it's called From Exile to Embrace:
Mm-hmm.
7 Secrets to Lead a Happier Life Through Love and Forgiveness. That's the very first one where I stepped out and shared my personal story. And the next one the next one was an anthology. It was a work with 3 women entrepreneurs. We did a book
Mm-hmm.
together where they shared their stories, because I had been doing some work with them and they were in my
Nice.
community. So that one is called From Exile to Embrace. Confessions of Successful Women Leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, is called Crazy Confessions. The Crazy Confessions, Defeat Depression, Dodge Suicide, and Dare to Lead.
Wow. From
Dare to
those
Live.
titles, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah,
I had to remember the titles of my own books, but
right.
so the last one is a guide, a go-to guide for the person of color, and it's research based, evidence based, with resources to help with depression, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
If people struggle with that taboo issue of suicide and thoughts to want to end their life, which so many people struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
and also just giving you that boldness to live a whole life, which
Yes.
I feel that can be a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, because sometimes the what we personally need in our lives, or what we're choosing to do in our lives, is not, other people don't necessarily understand it. And I find that a lot of times our family, not meaning any ill will, will provide their opinions, share their opinions, although you may not have asked for them, and be very vocal about what they think about what you're doing and how they think it's wrong or they don't understand it. And it's okay for you to say, but this is for me. It's, I have to do this for me, and not try to make everybody around us happy, because, and that's one of the happiness buckets. That's one of our main philosophies, is focus on making yourself happy, because in the end, it's your life, and other
Yeah,
people, they have their life to make their life happy. You have yours, and that's your job, is to focus on you and filling your happiness bucket with the things that you need, to make yourself full, right? And so I think it's so important, so very important. Um,
absolutely.
One of the questions that I have for you is specifically around your branding, because you have embraced your story, and because that is a part of who you are, as it relates to social media. How did you have a strategy about sharing your brand and your story? This is going to be a several layer question. I just want to give them all to you at once. So the first part of it is, did you have a strategy when you started on social media? And did that include your brand story? And how has that evolved over time?
Yeah, good question. So it definitely included sharing my story. I was sharing, like oversharing my story in the very beginning. I was very, I felt like I was very motivated and excited about putting myself out there and sharing my story and sharing my book. And that just kind of ebbed and flowed across my social media platforms. Whatever I was doing, I was making sure that my story was included in it, and just really being authentic and bringing my full self, to whatever that I was doing. I didn't necessarily have a particular strategy. Again, I was just doing what I felt led to do. I definitely did invest in trainings and coachings at the time to learn about, learn some techniques. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert at social media, but I learned some techniques and things at the time, and things have definitely changed over time now as they continue to. But
Mhm.
sharing my story was a part of the process. I wanted to make sure that people remembered who I was and why I was doing what I was doing, that I didn't
Mhm.
just, roll out of bed and say, one day I'm going to get on social media and start posting. That way it was purposeful, and I could connect with the people that I was supposed to connect with,
Mhm.
whomever I was supposed to
I
connect
know
with.
you mentioned that you mentioned your family. Let's talk about your family dynamics. What does your home life look like? What's the breakdown, I'd say?
Well, I can breathe easily and say that my life has changed quite a bit. I've been in transition. I've just recently moved from Houston to Austin,
Mm.
which has been great. That's been a breath of fresh air. But there came some changes with that as well. I am recently divorced. So now I'm a single mom, and it's myself and my 5-year-old and my 8-year-old son. So it's myself and my
Wow.
2 sons.
Your two sons. Yeah, the man of the house,
Yeah,
if you will.
the man
Oh wow.
of the
So
house.
you had two transitions. You had the moving is
Mhm.
one, and then the divorce second. So in those transitions, did you find that they were not so much emotionally? I'm not trying to dig into the emotional side of that, but just from a physical and the mental of the transition of the moving, how did you handle that? Was that hard, or did you feel like that was kind of strategically done, and that it went without a hitch?
It definitely was strategic. I planned to hire movers to
Mhm.
assist me because it was at the time just myself and he was four then. It was just us
Mhm.
two. And I was like, I have to hire movers to do all the manual labor. And I
Mhm.
had some hiccups in that process too with the movers and having to find another mover as a
Oh,
backup to
wow.
complete the process. Yeah, that's been I was going to
You're
talk
like,
about
"Ooh."
struggles when hiring, other small business owners and them being able to deliver through with services. But it
Mhm,
ended up ending well. I was able to get the support that I needed, but I definitely knew that I needed help. I couldn't do it by myself. I couldn't
mhm,
bootstrap it. I needed to hire professional help because it was just myself and my young child.
mhm. That's I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of times we are really hesitant to say, you know what, I can't do this. I have to get some help. And whatever form that help is going to come for you, is important for you to acknowledge that and not stress yourself out to a point of, you know, being in a bed curled up because you've tried to do too much. So I'm glad that you said that about getting the help that you needed at the time. Yeah. So tell me what your organizing struggles are. Where are you struggling organizationally? And this could be business or personal.
Well, the two are definitely married for me. I'm not separating either anymore.
Uh-huh.
And what I'm working on right now is simplifying. I am
Hmm.
spring cleaning as we speak, and I'm in your organized academy. So
Woo!
I'm organized. You know what? Yeah. I mean, because this is my reality, like working from home. I mean, it's not my first rodeo working from home. I did it
Mhm.
10 years ago and ebb and flow throughout those years.
Yeah.
But I want to have an environment where, it doesn't feel like it's separate, like business and work, but it all flows together.
Hmm.
And there's not this mental clutter in my mind because things are just so chaotic. So I'm simplifying as much as possible. I'm trying to be as lean as possible. So I'm decluttering, I'm getting rid of stuff, I'm giving stuff away, I'm
Yes.
dropping it off at the Salvation
We're
Army,
letting it
things that no longer
go,
serve
right?
a purpose.
Yes.
Letting it go.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what I always say. We're not getting rid of it, we're letting it go. Because getting rid of it has a
Letting it
negative
go.
connotation. But if you say, I'm letting it go, it's going where it's supposed to go. And
I
that's
love
not
that.
in my space. You know what I'm saying? It's not here. It's
Yeah.
going wherever it's supposed to go. That's awesome. I'm so
And
glad.
things that don't spark joy anymore, things that have,
Yes. Yes. I
yeah.
mean, seriously, it's so funny because people laugh at the fact that it's like, I don't, is what is its purpose in my life? I really have no purpose for this thing. It has been here for years. When was the last time I touched it? When was the last time I looked at it that I really took the time to enjoy it? You know, we have some items that are kind of trinkety that just the ornamental, I think is kind of the word I want to use. They're ornamental. They've always been there. They've
Mhm.
always sat there. They're not causing us any problems per se, but what is its purpose, you know? And it's like the pictures we have sitting around, the little vases we have. It's like, when I look at that, does it really give me something? Is it providing something for me, or is it just there? And when we start to take out the um kind of the emotion around, I so and so gave that to me, you know, and I've got to keep it. But why? They gave it to
Yeah.
you, and that it was a gift for you to do with what you want. So now that you've got this gift, if it's no longer providing you with joy, with a purpose, with doesn't have true meaning in your life, why are you holding on to it? And so when we start getting there, right, and let go of the guilt and all of those other things, it is amazing the change that it's going to have in your space and in your life and in your soul and in your business.
Absolutely. I'm
Holistic.
already seeing it. I'm already seeing it,
Awesome.
how it's working.
Oh, that makes me
Yeah.
so excited. On the ugh, you don't know what that just did to my soul today. So, what was the biggest? Like, you're in Organized Academy, so tell me what was one of the biggest ahas that you got from that?
One of the biggest ahas was what you were just sharing about that sentimental value of things and keeping them for so long, keeping things in boxes and feeling like, oh, I'll use it one day,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how things have moved me, literally moved with me from one city to the other.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm not gonna use this.
Yes.
Let me let it go to someone else who can have use for it. I'm not using it
Yes.
anymore. I'm not gonna ever use it.
Yeah. Alicia, listen, when I was in college, right after college, I lived in Chattanooga for 3 years. And when I moved from Chattanooga to Nashville, I want to say that was like in 2000. I moved to Nashville, I boxed up my stuff, came to Nashville, yada, yada. And then I ended up buying my home. So over a period of time, I think I bought my home in 2003, my first home. I was in that home for 9 years. Okay. When we got ready to move, I was like, okay, we need to start decluttering. I need to get my stuff together. I found some boxes from when I moved from Chattanooga, boxed up, taped up, hadn't opened them. And I'm like, why? Just why? And at one point I was like, just pick them up and throw them away because you obviously don't need what's in here. But I said, no, let me open them. Let me go through it. But I would say out of all 3 boxes, I maybe kept 10 things. And the rest of it, I mean, it was piles and piles of papers. It was papers from my office. And I was like, the clutter that the space this took up, and it caused other clutter because, the space that those boxes were taking up, something else could have been in that designated space, So it's amazing once you start letting those things go and the freedom and the breath that you get to feel in your day to day. The visual clutter, we don't realize this, but if you look like directly in front of you and turn your head to the left, don't look up and down, just turn to the left and turn to the right, you will see a lot of visual clutter, I'm sure, because most people have this issue. And my thing is, if you just clear that one visual space, or specifically around your desk, and not have anything in that space, you will be amazed at the level of productivity you will have, the level of just freedom of thought, because every time we look at something, our mind has to process it. And so we're like super processing all day. Even if you don't really see it, it's still there and having to be processed. And so I did this with a couple of clients and they cleared their desk off. And I said, you can put your pictures, put them up high or put them like far away. So it's not in that immediate zone. And they were like, I can't believe that one change made such a major difference in my productivity. So definitely try that. And then you have to let me know how that works for you. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So do you feel like your sons are organized, or is that a struggle in the household?
It is a challenge. I'm working with them. We're all a work in progress. Like even with decluttering, I feel like that's a process itself, but just really working with them to teach them how to pick up behind themselves, where to put things. If you take something out of one place, put it back. If you play with a toy, put it back. Or
Yeah.
are you playing with this toy anymore? You need to let it go.
Yeah, I have that struggle with my daughter. It's funny because she is all for teaching other people how to organize. But then I don't know if you saw the organizing video from her room, but that's proof that she doesn't put things back. But it's funny because since we went through that organizing process. So for those who are listening and don't know, I went through one weekend. She basically was my client and we went through and I had the consultation with her and she had to leave. And so for that day, I was organizing her room. She gave me permission to declutter her room without her being there. But the agreement was I would put her stuff like up for, I can't remember if it was 3 or 6 months, but if she doesn't ask for it in that time, I think it was 3. If she doesn't ask for it in that time, then I had permission to throw it away. And I was like, okay, oh, you sure? Okay, we're going to do this. And so I took all of my viewers on the journey of the declutter process in her room. And so I was like, this is a true life. Like I'm authentic. I'm like, this is what it looks like, whether I'm organized or not, this is her truth. and then walk through the steps of organizing. So when we did the big reveal, it was amazing the things that she was saying. She knows the rules. She knows, like, if everything has a place, if I put it in its place, then this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to find it. And, so just seeing that it triggered for her. And I can say today, it has been, I think 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks. And her room is pretty much the same way as when we finished. This morning I went up and there were some boxes in the floor. I was like, okay, we need to clean our room. We need to make sure our room is clean. She's like, it is clean. I was like, well, you got some stuff out, so let's make sure we put it up. So it was not only a process for her of learning, but it became a learning process for me of, so at a period of time, I just kind of was letting her go. And I was like, you need to clean your room. And that was all I'd say. Now I'm like, okay, no, we need to coach her through this for a little while until it becomes second nature for her. And then she won't have to think about, the steps, if you will. It'll be second nature. So that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, specifically sharing everything on video and walking through the stages. But it was an interesting aha moment for both me and my daughter of just, wow, this really did make a difference, So I'm always interested to see how people are addressing it with their children, specifically the decluttering, but also just the organizing of what is your process for helping to get things back? Is there a system or is there no system, and all of that with your kids? So do you notice a major difference between your sons as far as their organizational thought process or how they do things in their rooms?
I have not noticed yet. And the way our, home looks right now is different than it did before. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have their separate rooms right now. They're sharing a
Mm-hmm.
room. And in the future, they'll hopefully have their own rooms.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm guilty because I've been doing a lot of the organizing for them, but I'm setting up systems so that they can be able to, get their own shoes, get their own
Mm-hmm.
clothes. It's really been a process since moving here,
Mm-hmm.
because I just recovered from major surgery as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a series of things that happened. The
Yeah.
move happened, had major surgery, and now I'm at a place where I'm healthy enough to start decluttering and
Doing the
put
things.
things in.
Yeah.
So
Wow, you had a lot going on.
mhm.
You had a lot going on. Uh, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I will say this, when it comes to children and decluttering, specifically because you have two different age groupings, because you have, people react differently to stuff. I mean, adults do too, right? You're doing an awesome job of making sure they are in a place where they can do versus you having to do. I think that is an awesome transition for them, putting things at their level, making sure that they are part of that conversation too, I think is important. Of, where do you want your shoes? How do we need to do this? How do you get dressed in the morning? Like, that's going to be helpful as you begin the process of developing systems for them. But I would definitely just focus on the decluttering, but getting them involved in that process. One of the tricks that I did with my daughter is I said, for example, here's a basket. This is all the space you have for this particular thing. So we got her LOL dolls when we were doing the thing, and I gave her one bin. I said, this is the amount of space that these can take up. If it's overflowing, we got to let something go. You got to pick with how much you want. And at first she was like, oh gosh, but then that gave her kind of her boundary. And so it's easier for her to make that decision, like, okay, I've got a little too many. Let me see which ones I don't
Yeah.
really play with. And so that really helped her. So you may try getting them involved in the declutter process with their stuff, or even making it not a competition, because that sometimes that seems like you're clashing, but just, hey, who's going to get done first? I'm going to do my shoes, you guys do your shoes, and let's see who gets done, going through their stuff first. That we do
Yeah.
that here as well, and that becomes a fun little game that we play between her and my husband. It is hilarious. She's like, no, you need to let that go. That's torn. It's got a hole, having other people give their commentary on the stuff that you're saying you want to keep. It is hilarious.
That seems like a fun family game to play too.
Yeah. It's interesting, and it's funny to see how they perceive your stuff too. Like, we'll go through books and they're like, this looks so old. And then when you stop and think about it, you're like, oh, that is kind of an old book. And when was the last time I opened it? I just like it, so it's interesting to see other people's perspectives to help you really see the truth of some things that you may be stuck on. Was there anything else organizationally that you're like, oh gosh, or wins? I'm not going to say it all has to be negative. You can have some wins.
Absolutely. Well, the win that I've gotten to a place in my mindset, it's mostly been a mindset shift of marrying life and business, where it's not these separate things. I'm so overwhelmed, and simplifying things, being to try to be as lean as possible, which is a process, with the decluttering. Also, one of the challenges I had mentioned to you offline is more of a longer, broader topic about working with small businesses to get them to deliver on services, because I've had some hiccups. But one of the wins is, making things as simple as possible so I can do as much on my own first. So I'm setting up simple processes with that. And I'll work up to that step of hiring and outsourcing some work.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had it on my list to talk about today. Because that is a loaded question, and the very first thing that I always say is, specifically with side hustlers, but really for business entrepreneurs in general, is that you should always start with you doing whatever it is first, so that you can figure out, what do I absolutely need? Like, what are the bare minimums I need to get whatever it is done? And then figuring out, making sure that that's streamlined, and that we're not taking extra steps unnecessarily to do whatever it is that we're doing. Because one of the things that has come up during the pandemic is that many businesses didn't have an understanding of their basic manual process. They either were really just trying to do everything electronic, or they were trying to do it with people, like with multiple people, versus, if I had to let these employees go, how do I do what I need to do? And so what I'm finding is, with a lot of small businesses, and specifically side hustlers, we're hiring all these contractors to come and help with this little piece and this little piece. And then something happens with those people, and then we're stuck in a lurch because we don't know what they did, or we don't know how to do what they're doing. And then we can't do our job. We can't deliver to our clients. So going back and making sure that your baseline processes are in place, and that you fully understand them, and that you have determined what they are, you have documented what they are, then you can bring in a resource to assist with it. But in picking that resource, now you know what you really need. I find lots of people are like, well, I need a social media manager. I need a VA to help me with social media. But what do you need help with? What does that look like? And so you're hiring this person just because they have social media experience, or you saw their social media page, and you're like, ooh, I like that. I like the way that looks. And now they come, and now they're creating your processes for you. And that may be their way of doing it. That's going to cost you some extra money, because you're using the tools that they recommend. But they're doing a process that you have no idea how to do it. And maybe they own those tools and you don't. And so now you're stuck in a lurch because you can't afford to keep them, right? Or that relationship is severed, and then you're stuck with no social media, or it doesn't look the same or feel the same because you're now not understanding what they're doing. So in a nutshell, in a summary, I would say, number one, figure out your processes, making sure that they are as streamlined as possible, and that you have considered all of those little pieces. And then, and that's in Organized Academy. There is an entire module that is dedicated to just doing that. And then once you have that determined, then doing your requirements document for whomever it is that you're going, whatever position it is you're hiring for, making sure you have that requirements document that you can compare people to. So you say, okay, I'm gonna interview 3 VAs, and these are the requirements that I'm measuring them against. And as you interview them, you're asking questions related to your actual process and the things that you are looking to do and what their experience level is. Asking for references, asking for maybe their portfolio, if it's a visual type thing, and then making your decision from there. And I think that will help you kind of weed out the people who sound good, but really don't have the experience. A lot of times you can weed that out using those requirements document and being able to speak from your experiences of how you do it, right? And how you have been able to accomplish it in a manual process. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does.
Awesome. Yes. Were there, I can't remember, was that the only one that was on your list? The questions that you had?
Yes, that was the main.
Okay, I thought that was. Want to make sure I didn't overlook anything. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Alicia, for agreeing to sit down with me. I'm so excited to keep up with you on the journey of the decluttering process and everything. So definitely keep me abreast of what's happening as far as that's concerned. Okay. Do you want to let everybody know kind of how they can get into contact with you if they're looking to take you up on your services or get your book? Do you want to talk about how they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am updating my technology because one of the hiccups I had when I was outsourcing was I had hired a developer and the developer ended up deleting my entire website.
Oh my God.
So that was a hiccup. However, I am rebuilding my websites. So I have both websites, blackfamilybusiness.com and aliciabeatrice.com. And that's where a lot of those are my home bases. Anyone wants to find me on Facebook at Black Family Business or at the number 1, Alicia Buchanan. And I'm also on Instagram at Black Family Biz, not the full business, but BIZ, and at 1 Alicia Buchanan.
Nice.
But my website will have more up-to-date information by the time this airs as well with everything.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. So just jump over there so that you can get in contact with Alicia. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.